Welcome back to Active Ingredients, the leadership podcast that gets under the skin of what really drives success in life sciences. I'm your host, Tom Dove, founder and CEO of Fraser Dove International. Today's guest is Ian Wells, a CFO who's redefining what it means to lead through finance. Ian's story isn't about spreadsheets or cost controls. It's about purpose, empowerment, and building great teams. From Canada to the Netherlands, consultancy to life sciences, he's taken some bold steps, built zero attrition teams, and helped bring purpose-led products to patients, including championing the global fight against childhood myopia. We talk about eliminating the pedestal, leading through values, and asking the so-called stupid questions, and why the future of finance leadership is as much about human capital as it is about capital management. This one's packed with practical leadership, insights and advice, and a few powerful reminders about how to lead with both head and heart. Let's get into it. So today on Active Ingredients, I'm joined by Ian Wells, a CFO who's truly redefining the role. He's more than a finance leader. Ian is a high-energy business partner driving transformation, culture and purpose throughout his career, most recently within Vision Care. From restructuring finance teams to leading major ERP rollouts, Ian builds high-performing teams and delivers real impact. He's a global leader with a people-first mindset, and Ian talks less about the numbers and more about change, purpose and the why behind the work. Let's get into it. How are you, Ian?
Lovely. Sun's shining, so it's all good.
Perfect, thank you. And what about that for an intro? As said, not the typical finance leader. I'd say there's definitely more purpose than just the numbers. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I'm not a finance-focused person. I'm a business-focused person and a people-focused person. So yes, I need to take care of the finance side of things. I need to build good teams. I need to empower teams and have them run the organization and effectively run the numbers. But I'm here to connect the numbers with the business.
Lovely, lovely. So let's start speaking about teams. Before we do that though, I always start these Active Ingredients podcasts with the same question. What do you think are the three key ingredients of a successful leader and why?
Okay, I'm going to be a bit cheeky here because I'm going to give an answer which has more than three, but it's, yeah. Look, purpose, passion and vision is one. So there you go, there's three in one, but they really go together. You need a leader who brings people along the ride with you, and without driving passionate people, without giving them a purpose to come to work beyond just earning a paycheck. Earning a paycheck is, it's the sanitation aspect of it. We've got to pay people fairly, but people come to work now for much more than that. An empowerer as well, somebody who empowers teams to succeed, to grow and to be successful. Without a doubt, you cannot be a modern leader if you're not empowering teams, because without the team's success, you as a leader will not be successful. And finally, and this is a bit of a basic one, you just need to be a good human being. You need to be approachable, you need to be open, and you need to have people look at you and think, yeah, this is a good person that I want in my life. Because when we go to work, we work quite a lot. We end up working more hours than we think we do. And you want to be around good human beings, no fans or buts.
Yeah, I totally agree. Love that. So purpose, passion and vision, an empowerer, and then most importantly, a good human being who's open and approachable. Mm-hmm. I love that. But isn't it strange that we have to kind of talk about those where some leaders aren't effective at any of those three really key ingredients? I love the simplicity of what you've used here. But also, if you can get that right, what a joy to be, working with a leader that has those values.
Yeah. And then you end up seeing actually in the financial results, because you end up in the intermediary bringing in great teams, having teams engaged, doing more for you and sticking around. I've had zero attrition in my direct reports over the last 5 years, partially because we were implementing these things and people were engaged. They were coming to work, as I say, more than just a paycheck. They had purpose. They wanted to transform things. They had a purpose in what they were doing. We can talk about childhood myopia management, etc. But these things are critical. And having that lower turnover, I'm talking about my functions, but if you look across functions, lower attrition is going to bring you higher profitability.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And I think that those are some of the most important factors that are easily forgotten. I think when the pressure's on and the business is growing at a rate of knots, sometimes that kind of the simplicity of leadership disappears and it's more focused on the numbers. So let's get into some of the earlier years. Let's go back, as we normally do with this podcast, to see if we can understand more about your background, to see if there are any kind of direction posts throughout your life that got you into this kind of leadership role that you're in now. So tell me a little bit more about the younger you. Did you want to work in finance when you were growing up? What was your dream career? All of those kind of things.
I got to tell you, until third year university, I had no idea, no direction, and I was living off of, would I say, high intelligence or just ability to write exams pretty well and get through. So I was doing a combined honours math and physics degree, which sounds crazy given what I just said. And this was at UBC in Canada. I was living in Vancouver. My family were based there after emigrating from the UK. And I didn't know where I was going with this. I'm like, this is a really, really hard degree. It's taking my numeracy skills to the nth degree, and I didn't know where I was going with it. And I had a conversation with my father. My father, he's an aerospace engineer by training. He did his engineering work at Rolls-Royce back in the day, so the airplane engines, and went into general business. Later on, became actually a very successful business leader. Very, very high IQ. I'm not going to comment too much on his EQ, just because my mother was the EQ side, my father was the IQ side. They both had the other side as well, but one was stronger than the other. And I just came to him and I'm like, I kind of need some advice. And he said, go get chartered accountancy designation. He's like, I've worked in my years of business management with a lot of CAs, always impressive, always top tier, go Big Four. And from that point, I switched over to do an economics degree, and then later did some accountancy courses to get myself into KPMG, started up my first 5-year plan, and that was it. I was going into the finance field.
Lovely. So the background that you have there is fantastic. To be able to have, such guidance and then really be able to go from, very challenging degree to then hone actually into a career and then move into KPMG is a really, really nice kind of segue into your leadership career. So let's talk a little bit more about KPMG. First industry role or first role within the corporate world. How do you think working in an organization like that sets you up for the career that you've then gone on to do?
You bet. For me, so one thing I talk about a lot with people is having a 5-year plan. When I joined KPMG, there was a definite 5-year plan, and what that was to maximize my tool belt of finance skills. So I went and did audit for a couple of years, and then immediately switched out to an international tax planning group. The skill set's completely different, right? You see a little bit of tax stuff from an audit side of things, but from a true international tax planning, corporate structuring, these were all parts of my tool belt that I was filling up. And I knew I was going to leave, whichever Big Four that I joined, after getting my articles, I knew I was going to leave and go into industry. So it was a very strategic first 4 years. And the last year was always getting to industry. So that was my first 5-year plan. But it was to start building out this tool belt to set me up to be a generalist, which I believe the best CFOs are going to be generalists and not specialists in one specific area. Yeah,
nice. And what type of industries or what type of companies were you supporting whilst you were at KPMG?
It was predominantly, on the audit side, it was predominantly privately held. So I saw a whole whack, a lot of trading companies, a tire distributor. It was a little bit of everything, some not-for-profits. It was great. At that time, the exposure to all these different kinds of businesses and different people in business as well, because you end up learning from a lot of people, from your colleagues, who are obviously quite diverse in many respects, but then your clients are diverse to the extreme from that perspective. On the tax planning side, it was large multinationals predominantly. These were US or Canadian companies with interests cross-border, so we were enabling their financing cross-border, or their ability to set up from US into Canada, or even doing some tax arbitrage work through structures that no longer exist in this day and age anymore. But again, really just interesting stuff and quite challenging. The tax stuff, you're dealing with tax law, and I was dealing with Canadian tax law, US tax law, and also the treaties in between, plus sometimes playing around with Hungarian tax law at the time. That doesn't exist anymore, the ability to do what we were doing. But yeah, it was really challenging stuff. And it actually got me really interested in law, actually. And I've had really great relationships with the lawyers I've worked with over the years, because I find what they do fascinating. It's something I don't think I could do. I always joke, a very good friend of mine at Hoya, a lawyer, I always joke that he's the words guy, I'm the numbers guy. So don't give him numbers, don't give me words. We don't do well like that. So there's always an internal joke for that.
Yeah, create the dream team. So, because I always find it quite fascinating that the breadth of a role and industry and this kind of generalist nature from a finance perspective, actually chucking yourself into that for a few years and just being able to absorb lots of different ways of working sets you up really nicely for, the world of work once you do get into industry. How did you find that transition?
It was interesting because when I moved into industry, I took a role that was exposed to many different things. So I actually ended up using a lot of the skills that, not the direct skill of you need to do this direct audit program, or there's going to be this tax restructuring or this corporate restructuring, but it was that ability to think. It was that ability to take a problem and think about things and come up with solutions. So I was part of the team working on the technical IFRS transition back then. This is back in Canada when it's transitioning to IFRS. It was also doing some treasury advisory work. It was looking at some major investments and looking at things from an M&A or investment return standpoint. So all these different areas, and some areas I'd actually not touched, but I built the foundation for figuring it out and knowing where to go. And look, subsequently they paid for my Chartered Business Evaluator designation, so I continued my education with them, and subsequently, so because I was always looking to expand that tool belt. Everything I saw, I wanted to learn about, and it was a great experience still.
Yeah, love it. And then leaving KPMG, was that when you first got an understanding of the purpose of an organization and how you can try and channel the purpose, even though you weren't in life sciences at this point, but trying to understand more about the purpose of the organization in the industry to then be able to be a better leader within that role?
So the interesting thing is I joined a mining company, and mining has a bit of a dirty name in many places, including in Canada. Canada's a very big mining-centric economy, especially on the West Coast. So the thing I always say to people is, finding your purpose, vitally important. But if we're looking at a copper miner, the biggest commodity was copper. I'm like, if you look at your house, there's copper wires everywhere. There's copper piping everywhere. If you look at your phone, there's all these minerals and commodities in your phone that make it work. We cannot have the modern lifestyle that we have without mining. And the really important thing for people to understand is that we're not just standing still. People see it as a dirty industry with big trucks bellowing out diesel. I tell you today, it's been a while since I've been in mining, but the electrification of the machinery, and this is heavy duty machinery with tires taller than me, and I'm over 2 meters tall. There's been huge leaps and bounds from a sustainability standpoint, from an impact on the earth, because we need mining. There is no ifs, ands, or buts that we as humans in the life that we live today need mining. So I can absolutely find the purpose in that. Now, I have to say, in hindsight, I don't know how good of a job the leadership did of selling that story, because now being in life sciences, well, we do a much, much better job of selling the purpose and the value that we bring to society and the impact that we have on human life. I think we do way better in life sciences.
Yeah, but it's still good to be able to try and find it. Others don't, and they're concentrating the numbers. I mean, that was a big multi-billion-dollar business, right? Yeah. But you're able to still try and channel some of that purpose and really get a good understanding of the value that the business is bringing, not only to society, but then how you can bring that to the people in your teams.
Absolutely. You got to look about stakeholders, not just shareholders. And to me, this is where your purpose is to all of the stakeholders, including the employees. If you just want to go to work every day and earn your money, it doesn't matter where you work. For me, I can't work for a company that doesn't have a purpose, and I can't think about a broader remit than just increasing shareholder value. Shareholder value is a check the box. We need to do that. That needs to be one of many focuses, but there are many, many other stakeholders that we are accountable to as leaders.
Yeah. So let's talk about leadership. When do you feel that you got into your first proper leadership role?
So my first exposure to leadership was actually when I was at the tail end of my first year of auditing. I was senioring jobs, and I had some juniors, some fresh juniors, whether they were interning or just freshly starting mid-year, and juniors, their job is to learn and to ask questions. And I just remember taking an approach where they would come and say, "Oh, what do I do here? Or what's the answer to this audit-related problem or business-related problem?" And I would always turn back and say, "Well, you tell me what you think, and let's talk about your thought process." So this was my very, very first interaction with people from the leadership perspective, because they were coming to me as a leader, as a more knowledgeable person. And I didn't immediately just say, "Well, here's the answer, go away," because that's not leadership. That's just, you can chat GPT that nowadays, right? You don't even need the human involved. But for me, it's actually, I want to teach you how to think. And if I can help you with that thought process, then that's what a leader is, because I'm going to add value to you, and you're going to extrapolate that. And then you're going to do the same thing when you're senioring junior people who are just starting.
Yeah. So almost helping them get from one direction post to the next, just by asking some nice open coaching questions.
That's it. Yeah. It's give a man a fish or teach him how to fish. I'd rather teach people how to fish.
Yeah, love that. So that was it within KPMG. You then moved into the mining industry and then life sciences. You spoke about the purpose aspect. How did you make that transition from consultancy to mining to life sciences? Was it deliberate or was it more fortuitous at the time?
I'd say it's a little bit fortuitous. I was the mining cycle was going down. I was doing cost reduction projects. It was a great experience, absolutely. And again, goes into the tool belt. But I was looking to go into a different industry. I also was actually looking to leave Canada. Vancouver, unfortunately, is not the biggest, industrial place. It's more a place you go and enjoy life, which you do a very good job of in Vancouver. In fact, a lovely place to live. But from a finance career progression standpoint, it's tough for sure. There's not much supply and a lot of demand. So I was looking into the US. There was opportunities there. A lot of people I knew were going down to San Francisco at that time. And then, weirdly, this opportunity came up to move to the Netherlands to join Hoya. And I knew very little about Hoya. Came over for an interview, learned about it, was fascinated, and came over and joined. And it was a corporate role as part of the shareholding, tax structuring, corporate structuring, governance organization. And that's where I really started getting exposed to the life sciences side of the business. There's life sciences and IT. The IT takes care of itself, does very nicely and everything. Life sciences I was getting a lot more involved in. That's where I started getting exposed and really started getting a passion for it.
Yeah, love that. So do you think that this was like the catalyst role? I mean, it seems like you've taken a few risks here, changing industry, changing country. At that point, did you have a young family as well?
No, this was pre-marriage. So my wife subsequently joined me 8 or 9 months later after she finished her articling, and then the kids came a good couple of years later after we got married. So the risk was mitigated and managed to a degree.
Lovely. And then, but that's given you the opportunity to go and take on this challenge in a new location and then settle down roots and also start an amazing family. Wow, brilliant. So it seems like it might be your biggest career move to date. Would you say that that's right?
Yeah, certainly. Making that move to the Netherlands, joining Hoya. Obviously, the biggest step for me was becoming CFO of Hoya Vision Care 5 years ago. Also happened to come in the same time as COVID coming along, so amazing challenges at that time. But that was a real, I don't want to say a trial by fire, because I knew the business, I knew the people in the business, they knew me as well, they knew what I could bring to the table. So it wasn't like I was 37 at the time. So whilst I was a tad young, and there may have been some questions about the experience, people knew me and they knew what I could do. So it was just time to prove that and to build something, and that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, perfect. So let's get into that. So 5 years ago, you settled into the role as CFO. Was that a step up? Did you feel like you were stepping into, a bigger, more different, complex role at that point?
I had P&L ownership for the first time in my life. So that's the first thing. When you are truly accountable and having those quarterly meetings with your executive board, the pressure's on, of course. Now, COVID made it slightly different, and actually, in a sense, I'm thankful for COVID because it took the focus off of results, and it was about cash flow management. It was about work capital management. It was about relationship with customers. It was about reducing costs, which is actually, these are not the normal things we look at in business. We look at business more from a value, impact, and the passion side of things. So it was a very nice introduction from that standpoint. Although I was working 7 days a week for probably like 20 hours a day, but it's once in a lifetime. Hopefully, COVID is. So it was good. But yeah, look, it was a big step up, and I had to completely rebuild my finance organization. But that's exactly what I did. And you know what? I had two options. I could either make a success of it or I could not. And not was not on the table for me. So it was going to be a success, and that's what I did.
And at that time, can you give me some insight into the other leaders that you're working with and maybe the relationship that you had with the CEO at that time as well?
Yeah, so the CEO, Alexander, was also brand new at that time. He was coming in from the industry and joining. I have a feeling there was a purposeful timing of the two of us coming in to the company at the same time. We were kind of, I think, assessed from a human side that we'd be a good connection. To be honest with you, our relationship and connection was instantaneous and great. He's an amazing leader, admittedly, so it's easy to have a good relationship with him, I believe. Going back to that good human being aspect, he nailed that. So no, we were able to play off of each other very well. I would always have a take on things that, I'm a finance guy. I've never sold a lens in my life, but I'm talking to commercial guys who've been in this industry 20, 30 years, who are presenting their plans and their forecasts. And I'm going to come and ask them difficult questions and say, that revenue growth is not high enough. Your gross profit margin is not high enough. You're spending too much on the SG&A. Who am I to have a right to say, okay, I'm the CFO, but why do I have a right to do that? So I would always kind of look at it from the perspective of, look, you explain to me why. Here comes a stupid question because I'm a finance guy. I've never sold a lens. Tell me why that's right. Tell me why it shouldn't be higher or maybe it shouldn't be lower. And it was amazing. These stupid questions, as I coined them, really started taking off. And Alexander supported me with that by throwing in some provocative questions. And then I was enabled by him to play devil's advocate, that maybe his position, I said, well, what happens if we look at it from a different perspective? Or maybe that won't be the result of taking action A. And that ability to push back and just focus on value and focus on supporting our teams to get the right challenges for themselves, right? You're doing nobody any favors if you accept numbers that are too low. You're doing nobody favors if you set numbers that are too high. Right, so you've got to marry it and try and understand the business, drive the numbers together, and get the optimal target for everybody so that they can feel good about it, grow above market, generate value, and ultimately get their bonuses at the end of the year. Right, that's what is a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah, I love the way that you speak about asking stupid questions, then your CEO being able to ask those provocative questions. You and I have spoken before about eliminating the pedestal.
Yes.
Can you give our listeners a little bit more insight into how you actually brought that to life as an executive leadership team within the organization?
You bet. So for the listeners, I'm generalizing here, but in general, in Asian business culture, it's quite hierarchical, and people will look at me as title, less as person. Obviously, they know me as Ian. I've been with the company many, many years. It's all fine. But they would come in and they would often roll out the red carpet for CEO and CFO are coming to our plant. You got to do everything. We don't want that. We just want to go and actually see the business as it is. So we would always try and make it a level playing field. We're not here for you to present to us and for us to be something special and our words to mean so much. Actually, the conversation means a lot. So asking those stupid questions, giving the credit to the teams on the ground who really understand their business, whether it's on the manufacturing side, from a commercial side, I really feel sets a more flat organization. But it's also the fact that we're just very open to people bringing us ideas, bringing their thoughts, challenging us if need be. Look, it's not perfect by any means, but we find it really, really important that people bring down that the CEO, CFO are coming. The other thing we do is we have town halls. We communicate to the teams. We tell them about how great of a job they're doing and the importance of what they do in what we're doing. I'll give you an example. We were in Indonesia probably over a year ago now. It seems like yesterday. And Indonesia is one of the manufacturing sites that's very big for our myopia management product. And, I don't know how much the average person on the shop floor actually appreciates the impact they have on childhood myopia. We really made that point that without you guys, we couldn't do this at the scale we're doing. You guys enable this. So, you should all really be proud of yourself. So that, appreciation, being a little bit vulnerable as leaders is a really big thing to help realize that we all have a job here. And the job is to bring value to our customers and our patients, ultimately.
Yeah, and by being human, you mentioned this earlier, okay? Empowering people, being a good human and being approachable. Also, by holding your hands up and asking what you called stupid questions, it actually yielded some amazing results and some big transformations within the business, didn't it?
Yeah, so we've identified some white areas in our product offering, and it was partially also because of some bad habits, and we tend to not like management by KPI, and so sometimes people look at numbers on P&Ls and they look at their gross profit margin percentage, which is a number. It's a nice number, but should it be? I'm just throwing a number. This isn't the real number. Should it be 70 or should it be 65 or should it be 75? Actually, is the value generation not at 50%, right? And when you look at the business and understand the interaction of the business and the numbers, we can do that. So, just by, again, for me, it's taking numbers. In this case, I was looking at the demographics of a country and I was looking at the product we were selling. And I'm like, the two don't match at all. You're selling a product mix that would be more associated with a Japan than a Southeast Asian, growing economy, which has a lot of younger people. So you've got a bit of a gap there. And why is that? And it's because of management by KPIs. So all of a sudden we start digging in, and then we realize that we've got a gap, and we fill that gap and we generate value because you've already got the fixed cost of a sales organization, of a supply chain organization, and we can manufacture the product. In fact, we already do manufacture the product. We just didn't focus on getting it to our customers. And there's even more aspects that I won't bore you with, but it's it's huge of just trying to understand the business and have the teams who know the business explain to you why the numbers and why the plans are and why the product mix is why they are, and maybe it was pushed down the wrong path for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, or being able to, I'm just a finance guy asking some questions to a manufacturing leader. Let's layman's terms this, give me something simple, and then obviously you get somebody thinking in a slightly different way and get a different result.
No, that's absolutely right. We do that all the time. And actually, Alexander was always great. He hates low yields for a multitude of reasons. I'm with him on that. Number one, financially, it's atrocious. Number two, sustainability-wise, if you again throw a number out there, if you have a 90% yield, that means you're throwing away 10% of everything you input. That's terrible from a sustainability standpoint. It's also pretty bad from a human aspect that we're putting our human energy into something we're just going to throw away at some point. So the question is if you set the target to 92%, why is it not 100%? Okay, in reality, it's probably not going to be cost effective to get 100% yield, but we should all be trying to attain for that and really driving ourselves to be continually improvement. The one big thing I want from all of my teams is just continuous improvement. You could be at 90% yield today. We could be targeting in reality 98%. Yeah, we want 100%, but again, the reality is 98 is probably it. But as long as it's above 90 tomorrow and above 90, 92, 93, 94, as long as there's a plan, as long as we know what we're doing and we can execute on that. Yeah, look, plans sometimes take longer, they sometimes take shorter, but as long as we're generating value day by day and improving, that's really what drives me.
Yeah, love it. And you've obviously been encouraged and been given the space by Alexander, your CEO. You've then kind of demanded the same from your team, is giving them empowerment and some space. So it seems like you've got lots of good leadership stories to learn from. Sadly, what we found recording this podcast over the last few months is that there are more bad leadership lessons that are learned. What do you think of that statement? Kind of good leadership versus bad leadership, and where are you getting the lessons from?
So look, I look at things from a glass half empty versus glass half full on this one. So bad leadership is just a lesson to make every leader better. You learn from it. But look, without a doubt, good leaders, they drive engagement, they have passion, they actually drive psychological safety, which is to me one of my non-negotiables of a workplace. Bad leaders, they drive attrition. They showcase inconsistent behavior, which obviously then the people around them will have as well. And they fundamentally drive negative outcomes. You being the general you, and also people in an organization can see bad leaders by the fact that they have high attrition, lower financial results in the long run, and it ends up getting harder and harder for them to hire the right people. So yeah, look, there are bad leaders out there. There's always going to be. It's the old joke that when you look at doctors, you should kind of look at it because there's doctors at the top of the class and there's doctors lower down in the class, and they're all out there practicing today. So just because you go to a doctor doesn't mean it's a good doctor. And same can be said for everything, from finance professionals, CFOs, CEOs, leaders, technicians. There are good and bad. The thing is, for me, I can identify the traits of bad leaders by seeing what the people around them, how they react to them, and what people are talking about, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I like the point that you made about attrition, because you're in a pretty unique space over the past 5 years about having zero attrition within your team. So I'm keen to explore the topic of team building as what I would say is you're an approachable CFO. So what do you think has been the magic formula to that zero attrition rate that you've been able to build?
So I actually don't think it's that complicated, and thank you for mentioning that. Being open and approachable is just who I try to be. Now, evidently, I think I've been okay at that from a success standpoint. But look, building teams is relatively simple from my perspective. It might be hard to execute on, but the plan is you define the structure you want for the team. So you define the roles, the right structure. Then you start bringing in the right people for those right roles. And if you're taking over an organization, it might mean changing someone from one role to another, because actually their skill set might be better. They might be in an FP&A role, whereas they should be in a technical accounting role. That might well be the case. You start bringing in the team members, and then you have a corporate culture, your business culture, and then within the team, you're going to start building a culture. And as you build out more people, it actually gets easier to hire because you know what the culture is in that team. So you can already start identifying who the right people are. The technical skill stuff, in the end of the day, great headhunters will bring you technically capable people, and it's more about the fit within the team. So we do that. So right structure, bring the right people into the team. And then my big thing is because I'm a generalist, I can have a conversation with a tax person about tax, and I will give them a general guidance of, okay, I know the business really well. I've been here long enough to know the structure and everything. Here's where I see the world of tax. You're going to want to start looking at. These are the areas I think that need some focus. Now, you go out there, have a look, talk to people. I onboard people. I've been actually doing it remotely, which actually works really, really well in a global company, because being in the office and talking to someone in Thailand is kind of irrelevant when you're in Amsterdam, if you're in the office or not. So have really good onboarding, get them to discover themselves, have very regular touch points to make sure that they're understanding correctly and support them in that. And then you have a sit down and say, okay, so for the next 3 to 5 years, what do you want to achieve? And then they'll lay out the roadmap. We'll agree on the direction. And then we'll start talking about my favorite thing, which my father taught me many years ago, which is RARA, which is resource, authority, responsibility, and accountability. So I'm going to need to give you resources and authority. And based on those two, you'll be accountable and responsible for the outputs. If I give you fewer resources, I obviously am going to expect fewer outputs in that, and I can't hold you accountable to outputs which need higher resources when I give you fewer resources. Same thing for authority. You need to have the authority to do what you want to be doing. So this has actually been a really great thing that we align on what's going to be done. We align on the resources multi-year, managed year by year, and then my checkpoints with them are, hey, are things going well? Are you supported? Because I'm here to cheerlead you. And are you getting the results you want? Do you need help, or do you end up needing more resources, or do you have an authority issue? And I really again, it's a non-negotiable. This rah-rah thing is a non-negotiable for me, that I set people up with this, and they've really seemingly enjoyed it, because I'm giving them autonomy to go and do what they need to do. and I'm just here to support them. I often tell people I'm like a traffic light. You just come to me and I'll point you in the right direction. You'll give me a problem, and I say, you need to talk to this person. Do you want me to talk to that person for you first to bring down the barrier if that's necessary? And sometimes we do. Sometimes they just go for it themselves. But the success I've seen has been absolutely astronomical over the last 5 years. And the transformation the team have gone through, I've done none of this with my own hands. I always joke that leaders don't really do much except for set up the right structures, the right people, support them, cheerlead them, and help them when they have problems. We're not actually doing anything with our own hands, really.
Yeah, and I love that, because I know that the CEO that you worked very closely with, he wanted to be the laziest person in the business. That was kind of his strapline, and it seems as though you've been able to kind of take some of that and then point people in the right direction as well with a similar ethos. So rah-rah, though, I really like. So what we're talking about there is resource, authority, responsibility, and accountability, equaling empowerment.
Yes.
And then if you've got an empowered team with the right values, the right behaviours, the right personality mix that you talked about earlier, you're on to that magic formula of potentially zero attrition.
Yes. No. And again, I sold the team transformation. I sold them a purpose, and they were living and breathing that for the last 5 years. So it's come true what I've sold them. Let's put it that way. So I've had a great engagement with the team, and I really enjoyed working with them. And I actually feel lucky that I hired such amazing talent. I was very fortunate from all around the world. I've got a team here in Amsterdam, but there's teams in the US, in Asia. In different parts, and I've been very, very lucky.
Yeah, and being a good human. At the crux of it all, it's giving people all of this opportunity, and then doing it in a nice, caring, empathetic way, which you don't always get with leaders when the pressure's on. So you've eliminated the pedestal. You've got this magic formula for teams. The other thing that I've found really interesting in our discussions is your leadership has actually taken on a slightly more personal and a more health and mindset centric kind of path as well. So I know that you're all about continuous improvement, but it's also continuous improvement of people as human beings, not only in the working sense. So let's talk about healthy leadership.
Yes.
Can you give our listeners a little bit of insight into how you think about more than just the work, more about the body, more about the mind?
You bet. So, look, I've started going down a rabbit hole, which started with the works of Peter Attia in a book called Outlive. The idea here is about, what we're going to be when we're 80, 90, 100. And, what we need to do today. I'm 42, so, I need to be a certain level of healthiness today to counter the impacts of the deterioration as we get older. So with that, I've kind of changed my diet a little bit. I'm hitting weights a little bit more. I'm running regularly and just generally being quite healthy. My wife's joined me on this path. As I say, I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, so I've gotten into some quite technical medical books, which I find really interesting. I don't think a lot of people around me will find interesting. But the thing is, you can't be preachy with this stuff. You can't go to the workplace and be like, put the croissant down. You realize that refined carbohydrates, what they do to you, and glucose spikes and insulin and blah blah blah. You don't want to be that guy. But what I found has worked really, really well is actually, when we have all the leadership group come together and there'll be a catered lunch, because I want to control what I'm consuming. I'll have my 6 eggs and some avocados. And some people know, like a great guy. He's an ex-wrestler. He's like, oh, that's what I used to eat when I was wrestling. Yeah, that's great. Oh, no, you've inspired me now. And people will come and ask. And I say, well, I'll tell you because you're asking. And I've had amazing stories. I lent the book to Alexander. So he's gotten into it a little bit. I've had some people tell me that, they went on holiday and because they overheard me talking about it when he got the book, and them and their wife were arguing about who could read it while they're just, sitting by the pool or whatever it is. So I've been able to have a positive impact from that perspective. But if you think about what we do on a day-to-day basis in improving our, patients' lives, why should we allow our lives and health to suffer? We work to live. We don't live to work. And I'm really focusing on the fact of the after work aspect of my life, and also the during work aspect is kind of important too, because that's today. But I really want to have that that mindset throughout the organization that we should be doing the best for what we can do for our mental health, our physical health, because we're going to end up being actually more value added as workers as well. And that means we can make more of an impact in society because we're doing good things, right? It's all connected and it's all great.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm with you on the healthy leadership vibe, but I love the way that you talk about it, not being preachy, but other people noticing.
Yes.
And then for you to guide them like, oh, this is something that I've read, and that kind of interest and intrigue is really, really interesting.
Yes. No, it was amazing that people have even, they notice and make comments about the fact that I basically don't drink alcohol anymore. I never drank too much, but they notice it because when you go for dinners and stuff and, I'll just have a sparkling water. And it's like, yeah, I'm like, again, they ask, and I'm like, well, I don't want to tell you how bad alcohol is for you as you're about to have a nice glass of wine or a beer or whatever. It's just a personal decision I've taken to improve my life. But I also now having young children. It is one of those things. I think when you're around this age, you start having kids and you start looking at life slightly differently. It's a legacy thing. I want my children to grow up. Yeah, they eat chocolate, they eat the kids' stuff that they eat, but fundamentally, I want them to have good role models in us as parents, and they see that exercise is a normal part of life, and eating healthy is not a special thing. It's not a short-term diet. It's actually part of who we are to eat good, healthy food. And I want them to have an amazingly good relationship with food, with exercise, and fundamentally with their, again, physical and mental health.
Yeah, and there is absolute, the combination of feeling good physically and the clarity you get from a mental standpoint can only be good for leadership.
Absolutely.
I think that is often overlooked, and when there are pressures or when things do get tough, you still need that basis of healthy leadership, as you call it, as the fundamentals that then set you up in the right format, and you then show up in the right way as the leader that people want you to be. So absolutely great. Thank you very much for sharing your information on that. The other thing that I am quite keen to talk about, though, is the passion that you obviously have for the organisation that you've been working with over at Hoya and myopia. Your former CHRO has said that you're a passionate advocate for social impact. You've been a vocal champion for Hoya's efforts to eradicate childhood myopia. Can you share more about really tapping into the purpose of the organisation and how, being an ambassador of that has helped you think above and beyond just the organisation and the role that you were in?
You bet. So the World Health Organization estimates 50% of the world's population will be myopic by 2050. So any good leader would say we need to have a material impact on that number. We've got, we've still got a fair amount of time. We've got 25 years until we hit that point. But the sooner you start and sooner you have an impact, the better. So the one thing I wanted to do is, we talked about it earlier about being a CFO who likes to not talk about numbers but like to talk about the impact. I just took every opportunity I could to take some of my stories about when I drop off my daughter at school and I see children in lenses who I'll assume that the children are myopic, but they don't have myopia care lenses. And Hoyas or otherwise, the fact of the matter is that these children I live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, in the Netherlands, right? These children should be having this myopia management care. And we need to be ambassadors to get the word out because it's a new technology. It's not known. I was talking to somebody earlier today who has children who had no idea that this even existed. And they've got a four-year-old child who, starting to get into that ripe age of starting to assess the eyes and look, and then we'll start to treat it in the coming years. So it's been a huge passion point. Obviously, having my own children, I was being pressured because my at that time 3 and 4 year old had not seen an ophthalmologist. So, my chief marketing officer and chief technology officer was like, why are you not getting them checked? Come on, you're an ambassador. Go to get it done. So we got it it's it's really about making a difference. You know, what I love about life sciences, and if I look at Hoya's both vision care and actually some other divisions, is if I look at the endoscopy world, which Hoya has a business in, you go from diagnosis with endoscopy to actually treatment. So you can actually do treatment now through endoscopic procedures as opposed to cutting somebody up. You have an endoscope go down. I think that evolution is amazing. And with the ophthalmic lens world, you go from correcting vision to actually managing the, in this case, myopia. And I see the future as less so marginal improvement. There will be marginal improvements in materials, in coatings, in designs for progressives, but the real impact on humanity and yet real value generator is actually going to be in treatments that you can put on an ophthalmic lens that has an impact on the human. So there's lots of technologies that are coming along, and I'm really excited over the next 5, 10, 15 years what's going to come along. But the myopia management is the first massive game-changing step of that, and I can talk passionately for hours about it. I really can, and the people within Hoya know that about me. They've seen me do it.
Yeah, and it's been wonderful to hear it, because I remember talking to you about it, and you were saying with the increased numbers and getting to maybe that 50% number, actually it's the kids that don't know that they have an issue, that are in a classroom and maybe can't see the whiteboard or have challenges and then are seen as disruptive, and actually it can be quite a negative cycle if it is undiagnosed.
Yeah, no, look, and these kids are the ones suffering because they're not going to be seeing the whiteboard or blackboard as clearly. They're not going to understand that they've got an eye impediment that can easily be corrected, first and foremost, above and beyond managed. And if then children start having a negative relationship with school, that's not good. Education is such a cornerstone for setting us up as who we are and what we can be, that I would love it. But this is the awareness thing, right? I would love it if every single parent in the world would have their children's eyes tested at the right amount. Like, I'm not a technical guy, so I can't tell you exactly when that would be. Smarter people than me do know that. But when I see it, I really, really, really want us to eradicate this problem, because in the Western world, we absolutely can. We know how to do it. We're not doing it well enough.
Yeah, thank you. And all I can say is from listening to you, it's so clear that you are a leader. Okay, a leader amongst many different things. So it could be from the health perspective, from a purpose perspective, asking the silly questions. But the crux of it is you could probably do any role within an organization, because it's actually the leadership, the transformation or the change part that really inspires you. And I think that you've gone on to inspire many people within the organizations that you've worked for. And I think this has been an absolutely fantastic discussion. My questions now, though, are, I suppose, upon what's next for leadership. So not just within the life sciences, but leadership in general, because I think that you are like a real positive, leader for the future already. A lot of the things that you're thinking about and talking about, people are trying to make those steps to get there. So it seems as though you're already ahead of the curve on quite a lot of things. But what do you think the future holds for leadership?
So it's an interesting one, because the world is changing so much from a people perspective. So if we look at, first and foremost, the current conversation about work from home, remote work, or back to the office, and we look at the younger generations, I start to feel really old when I start talking about the younger generations, but the younger generations want very, very different things than my generation does. And we've actually spent a lot of time assessing this and how we can be the right, employer for choice, and keep these guys who are often switching companies, even switching careers, doing their own things on the side, so they become less dependent on a company. And a big part of that is having a purpose, having a vision, having that passion. So those cornerstones that I talk about. Look, I think the leadership of the future, you always need to be focusing on why you're different, right? And why you're attractive. I love some of the things that we've been doing recently, that we've been focusing on why we are good as opposed to why our competitors are bad. And I love that mindset difference. I think into the future, we need to be looking at our positives, not their negatives, right? It's you don't raise your boat by sinking another. I think is the saying, or you don't float your boat by sinking another. So there's those aspects. On the hard side of things, data is becoming more and more important. I say this as a finance person, and more data visibility, speed of visibility, quality of the data. You talk about the transformation side of things, because with transformation comes better, more timely data, no ifs, ands, or buts. We talk about the empowerment aspect of it. Micromanagement needs to be a dead thing, absolutely. From a leadership perspective, we talked about bad leaders. Unfortunately, micromanagement is one of those aspects. But I think, ironically, and especially as we go into a more and more digital development world with AI and all these things, human capital development will become more and more important from my perspective. And that's why, I come back to having a good human being. If you want to work for a company with a leader who's a good human being versus a less good human being, where are people going to end up saying? They're going to go with the good human being. And I think it becomes so obvious when a company is led by a good human being, because there's all these other things that go along with it, that you'll attract the best talent, and you'll have them stay around for longer, and you're going to get all this advancement that is driven by, as funny as it sounds, human brains are what's driving, the AI development. I know and AI is not human brains, it's artificial, but that's where the future is, absolutely. So it's less about building big factories with the lowest cost manufacturing. Ironically, in this day of sustainability and also diversity in supply chains, actually building big factories with massive scale is becoming less cool. Your big customers are demanding 2 distinct locations to supply. And from a sustainability standpoint, and with the way that automation has developed along the way, you're going to nearshore things as well. So the skill sets we need are much more human capital based. And I think that's where leaders need to be focusing.
Yeah, love that. So in this ever-changing, more digital AI world, actually you're saying the more human aspects are going to be the thing that really win from a leadership perspective. I absolutely agree. I love that. Also, I think that you mentioned earlier EQ and IQ, okay? The headhunting company that I own, we talk about impact players having a mix of EQ, IQ, and CQ. CQ being that change intelligence. And it seems as though you kind of hit the nail on the head for all 3 of those aspects, and then have been able to be an impact player and create more impact players within your organization. I think that is definitely also the future of leadership, and this has been an absolutely fantastic discussion. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes, no, thank you. And it's funny what you say about that, the change aspect, because when I look at where I come from and the influence, my father more heavier on the IQ, my mother more on the EQ. Change was not in their world, and this is a couple of generations different now, but you're absolutely right. That there'll probably be even another component in 20 years when the next generations come along about when business continues to develop and what we do with that. It's a fascinating journey for sure.
Yeah, so I absolutely loved it. If you could go back and talk to your younger self in that first leadership role, what would you tell them?
So for me, it comes actually down to these non-negotiables. I found my non-negotiables have been so important to me as a leader because I'm consistent with them. And I like to tie every single decision or every interaction I have to what these fundamentals are. So I touched on some of them already. A psychologically safe place, for sure. I think I always tell people that, look, I want to drive a workplace and a workforce where I'd be happy for my mother, my wife, and my children to work in. That's what I want to be developing. And these are the people dearest to me, and potentially the most vulnerable people in my world. And I want them to experience a psychologically safe, good workplace with great leadership. We need to be driving impact and value, building a legacy. This is something I'm really passionate about. When you leave a company, I want people to be thinking, well, wow, this is the impact that Ian had on us as people, on us as an organization, or on our customers or patients or whatever it is. We talk about purpose, of course, being vulnerable, being consistent, defining a quality standard. This is one thing I've taught my team a lot. It was actually a great teaching I had when I was younger in my career about defining your quality standard and maintaining it. And that becomes a time management thing. And actually saying no to additional work is something I tell all of my team, because sometimes I'd come to my team with additional stuff, and I don't want them to say yes because I'm asking. I want them to say yes because they can deliver the quality I'm expecting from them. And it's the same thing for me. I would happily say no if I don't think I can deliver the quality, or say yes, but we need to reallocate this. And again, we talked about the resourcing and empowering and cheerleading the teams, and really never ever go against your non-negotiables, and never go against anything that you truly believe in, because these are who you are as a human, above and beyond as a professional.
Absolutely love it, Ian. And at the beginning of this, okay, I said that you are a CFO who I think is truly redefining the role. I think you're doing it through being a wonderful human, a great leader, and somebody that has got many different purposes or passions that come to the fore. And I just think it's been an absolutely fantastic discussion. I've been writing hundreds of notes already, but I think, this would be a really good episode, especially for those finance leaders maybe taking a step out of consultancy into industry for the first time, to see what is possible, or also maybe some finance leaders that could be stuck and can't drive the change that they need. Maybe they need to just go back to some of these really simplistic yet important steps that you were talking about. So Ian, fantastic. Really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I hope some of the listeners use this. And to your point, realize that the CFO of the future is not a finance person. That stuff's check the box. Got to do it. Got to know how to do it. But in the end of the day, the CFO of the future is that transforming, driving leader of an organization and of a business and of people, fundamentally.
Thank you. Lovely. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Active Ingredients. As you can see, Ian Wells is one of those rare leaders in finance that proves it's a force for transformation, not just transactions. I really enjoyed the bits about expanding the team's toolbox, also how he champions healthy leadership. In a few of my other discussions with Ian, we've spent so much time on that topic. I really love his passion for it. He's showing what the next generation of leaders and CFOs could and should look like. If you're in finance, leadership, or just care about building purpose-driven teams that deliver, this conversation is a good playbook for that. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Active Ingredients.